Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Friday, June 14th. Today is day 252. I wanted to provide a bit of an update today from OXFAM. In recent weeks, this is OXFAM's words, they said we've witnessed a small uptick in humanitarian assistance, reaching populations in North Gaza and a significant decrease in southern and central Gaza. The Rafah crossing, which was previously the primary aid access point for the entirety of Gaza, has remained closed for nearly 6 weeks. While some aid is entering the Kerem Shalom crossing, intensified bombardment and heavy urban warfare in the area has rendered it extremely difficult and dangerous for humanitarian workers to obtain and distribute aid from the crossing. As the threat of famine in northern Gaza persists, aid organizations are reporting an alarming surge in malnutrition in central and southern Gaza. Over the last 2 weeks, 2 children in Gaza have died from starvation-linked ailments. One child was 7 months old and the other was 13 years old. And because these children, or both of these children, lived in the middle of central Gaza, highlighting the grave impact of Israel's Rafah offensive on humanitarian distribution in South and Central Gaza. In southern Gaza, 3,000 children have been cut off from the treatment for moderate and severe acute malnutrition. And just remember, one of the consequences of malnutrition can mean limited development opportunities. And so there can be severe health repercussions for the rest of these children's lives. So treatment for childhood malnutrition requires 6 to 8 weeks of consistent and uninterrupted medical attention, special food, clean water, and a hygienic environment. None of these requirements are available in southern Gaza. Over the last month, water treatment facilities in the south and middle areas have stopped functioning, sewage continues to overflow into the streets, and food and medical supplies have become increasingly scarce. 3,000 children are at immediate risk of becoming critically ill. Gaza also remains under a full electricity blackout since October 11th. Fuel is urgently needed for the Gaza electricity distribution company teams to conduct damage assessments and field repairs. There's a small number of limited exceptions where fuel has not entered Gaza since the Rafah operation began. Around 4,500 trucks, including both commercial and humanitarian, are queuing in Egypt awaiting entry into Gaza. 4,500 trucks. Reports indicate that food has been rotting in trucks for several weeks. The system of education in Gaza is in tatters. 80% of school buildings are damaged, including 38% directly hit. 6,200 students and more than 300 educational staff. 300 educational staff have been killed since October 7th. 65% of school buildings used as displacement shelters have either been directly hit or damaged. 65% of school buildings have been directly hit or damaged. All land routes into Gaza must be fully opened in order to even begin alleviating the humanitarian crisis that exists there. And the US and other powers have to do everything possible to push for a long-term permanent ceasefire. We've been calling for an immediate release of the hostages, including also Palestinian prisoners who've been held unjustly in Israeli prisons, and full unimpeded humanitarian access. In the West Bank, I mentioned that over the past week, the number of deaths in the West Bank has surpassed 500 people. It's now 521 Palestinians killed. 521 Palestinians killed in the West Bank. That includes 126 children killed in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and approximately 5,100 Palestinians injured in that same period. 10 Israelis have been killed and at least 105 have been injured in the West Bank since October 7th. These are Oxfam's numbers. In Israel, their death toll is 1,139 Israelis and foreign nationals. That includes 27 Americans killed, 3,400 injured since October 7th. And following the Nuseirat, which I have been talking about as a massacre, that was also where the 4 hostages were rescued. The total number of hostages believed is 120. You know, the New York Times and other news has said that there were believed to be 75 hostages still alive. But you'll see that Hamas has said there is no knowledge. No one has any idea. A senior Hamas official said to CNN just today, no one has any idea how many hostages are still alive in Gaza. There's a bill to designate UNRWA as a terrorist organization in Israel and another to strip them of any legal protections and privileges in Israel. And that has passed the first stages of the legal process in the Knesset. And according to a senior Israeli official, the changes that Hamas has made to the hostage ceasefire agreement that President Biden proposed, a senior Israeli official has said that they're just claiming that Hamas is doing this so that they won't have to release the hostages. This Israeli official said that they will not that Israel will no longer send a delegation to continue negotiations as long as Hamas does not withdraw the changes that it's demanded. President Joe Biden said yesterday that he does not expect the deal to move forward in the near future. So he also said he's not lost hope. Jennifer Master is a partner of one of the rescued Israeli hostages, and she told ABC News that the first Israeli soldiers he encountered during the operation were dressed as women. That was just reported today. And on the northern border of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon, hostilities have continued. Hezbollah launched 16 suicide drones into northern Israel in the last 72 hours. 11 of those 16 were intercepted. Hezbollah has claimed responsibility and said that those and the 35 rockets that were launched from Lebanon into northern Israel, some of which were intercepted, Hezbollah said that's in response to the killing of their senior field commander, Taleb Abdallah, which happened earlier in the week. One of Israel's councils in northern Israel said that 2 houses and a bus that were converted into a home were damaged. Firefighters in northern Israel are battling flames. The National Unity Party leader, Benny Gantz, said in an interview that if Hezbollah does not stop attacking Israel, Lebanon should burn. The Hezbollah-affiliated Al-Mayadeen TV channel said that 2 people in southern Lebanon were killed and many more were wounded in the South Lebanon city of Tyre after an alleged Israeli attack yesterday. The Israeli army, this is in relationship to Gaza, said its forces found passages that go through walls in an apartment in Rafah, which would enable Hamas members to quickly change their locations in a building. The army also said that jets struck a booby-trapped compound in Rafah, which led to the detonation of other buildings nearby, indicating that they had contained explosives. And IDF Southern Command Chief Finkelman said that during a situation assessment in Rafah, the Israeli army's plan is clear, and he vowed to continue to move forward until we obtain our objectives. The death toll in Gaza is 37,266 Palestinians killed and at least 85,102 wounded since October 7th. In Israel, the Israeli police commissioner, Shabtai, told the Attorney General of Israel that the far-right National Security Minister Ben-Gvir ordered his deputy to stop providing security for Gaza aid convoys without Shabtai's knowledge. Shabtai said he only learned of this order after the IDF chief, Halevi, complained to him about far-right activists blocking aid convoys to Gaza. Ben-Gvir ordered, he literally ordered security to stop providing security for Gaza aid convoys. The U.S. has sanctioned Tsav 9, which is a right-wing group with ties to IDF reservists and Jewish settlers in the West Bank for attacking aid shipments bound for Gaza. So that happened in the last 24 hours. And Israel said that yesterday there were a total of 220 trucks carrying humanitarian aid that entered into Gaza, but only 70 were collected from Kerem Shalom and Erez. So what that means is that if 220 trucks entered into Gaza, they're not able to be distributed. And a lot of that has to do with security conditions. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but before October 7th, it was a minimum of 500 trucks needed. And you heard it will take open checkpoints, open borders for the needs to be met. Israel's coordinator of government activities said the contents of 1,000 aid trucks are still waiting to be collected in Kerem Shalom alone. Citing the need for substantial manpower, the Israeli government is expected to extend another 6 months the temporary order that lengthens the reserve duty for combat soldiers who have reached the exemption age by 1 year. And U.S. State Department spokesman Miller called Israel's military action in Rafah a more limited operation that is not in the size, scope, or scale of operations conducted elsewhere in Gaza. I mean, I'm glad he thinks so when several hundred people were killed during it. That is just, to me, ignorant. The Washington Post reported that a senior Israeli official said the U.S. provided highly detailed satellite imagery that Israel lacked prior to October 7th. And Senator Bernie Sanders expressed his backing for a new UN report that accused Israel and Hamas of war crimes and crimes against humanity, calling it absolutely imperative that we support institutions that are attempting to uphold international law. The White House said that on Monday, Vice President Kamala Harris will speak about October 7th and the Gaza conflict's related sexual violence, followed by a panel discussion of survivors and international experts, and a partial screening of Screams Before Silence, which is a documentary on Hamas's October 7th sexual violence. And this past week, Pope Francis issued an urgent appeal for humanitarian aid to be allowed to enter into Gaza and support for the ceasefire proposals. This happened on Sunday during worship. He called for humanitarian aid to be able to reach such desperately needed areas. He said, I encourage the international community to act urgently and with all means to come to the aid of people in Gaza who are worn out by war. Humanitarian aid must be allowed to reach those in need and no one can impede it. And I would encourage you to mark your calendars Monday, July 1st, Churches for Middle East Peace, we'll be having a briefing webinar. I'll be sharing about my most recent trip. I just got back, in the last week or so from Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. I'll be joined with some others who are there with me at Christ at the Checkpoint. So I hope you'll join us on Monday, July 1st, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time for that gathering. Might God go before us in our continued efforts toward peace.